Most men don't realize they're already failing this test before it even begins. It usually starts in a small, forgettable moment. You're staring at your phone, rereading a message you already sent. The words haven't changed, but somehow your confidence has. You wonder if you sounded too eager, or too cold, or if silence means disinterest. In that moment, something subtle happens inside your mind. Your emotional control quietly shifts away from you. And that is why only a small percentage of men ever pass what we are really talking about here. This isn't an IQ test on paper, it's a psychological one, and most men never even notice they're taking it. If this observation feels uncomfortably familiar, pause for a second. That awareness alone already puts you ahead of where you were a few seconds ago. And if you find these quiet psychological patterns interesting, consider staying connected with this space. Subscribing isn't about notifications or algorithms here. It's simply a way to keep observing the hidden mechanics behind male psychology together, calmly and without exaggeration. What most people call intelligence is the ability to solve problems under ideal conditions. But male intelligence, especially in attraction and dating, is something else entirely. It's the ability to remain internally stable when conditions are emotionally uncertain. The moment you need reassurance, the moment you mentally chase clarity, the moment your mood depends on someone else's response, you've already stepped outside the frame of control. Later, you'll understand why this matters more than confidence itself. Modern dating doesn't punish men for lack of looks or money as much as it quietly filters out men who cannot regulate their internal state. Ghosting, delayed replies, mixed signals, emotional distance. These aren't personal attacks. They are psychological pressure tests. And most men unknowingly reveal everything about their mindset by how they react to uncertainty. The man who spirals internally when things go silent rarely notices that his behavior subtly changes, his tone shifts, his timing changes, his energy becomes heavier, and attraction responds not to words, but to emotional gravity. This is where most advice goes wrong. Men are told to be confident, but not taught emotional neutrality. They're told to be detached, but not shown how to remain present without attachment. Real emotional control isn't about suppressing feelings. It's about not outsourcing your self-worth to outcomes you can't control. That distinction is small, but it's one of the hidden rules few men ever learn. Attraction doesn't grow in moments of effort. It grows in moments of restraint. When you don't rush to fill silence. When you don't over-explain. When you allow space without anxiety. The man who passes this psychological test understands that uncertainty is not a threat. It's information, and he observes it without reacting to it. Rejection, for example, is rarely about being unwanted. It's often about being emotionally predictable. When a woman senses that her responses directly control your mood, the dynamic shifts without either person consciously deciding it. The power imbalance becomes obvious, not in dominance, but in emotional leverage, and attraction quietly exits the room. Here's something most men don't realize until much later. Emotional independence is more attractive than emotional intensity. Intensity seeks validation. Independence signals internal structure. You can be interested without being invested. You can care without clinging. And when a man reaches that state, he stops trying to pass tests because he no longer feels like he's being tested. This is one of the core observations behind what the male code quietly studies. Not how to win someone over, but how men lose themselves before anything even begins. The men who stay grounded don't do anything special. They simply don't collapse inward when outcomes are unclear. Confidence, in this context, isn't loud. It's not assertive language or dominant posture. It's emotional consistency. It's being the same person, regardless of response. That's why so many men feel confident at the start, then slowly unravel. The pressure doesn't come from rejection. It comes from expectation. And expectation creates attachment long before connection does. Later, you'll see why this also applies far beyond dating. The same men who overthink texts often overreact to criticism. They internalize setbacks. They personalize randomness. Their intelligence works against them because it keeps searching for meaning where none exists. Passing this psychological test means knowing when not to interpret. Knowing when silence is just silence. Knowing when distance isn't a message. And most importantly, knowing that your value doesn't increase through effort, but through self-containment. There's a quiet moment where men either pass or fail. It's the moment they want clarity but choose patience instead. The moment they want reassurance but choose self-trust. The moment they could chase but don't. This isn't strategy, it's temperament. Modern dating culture rewards men who can sit with ambiguity without creating stories in their head. The man who doesn't rush to define things. Who doesn't seek emotional guarantees. Who lets attraction unfold without trying to manage it. That man feels rare, not because he's perfect, but because he's not reactive. And here's the paradox most men struggle to accept. The less you need a specific outcome, the more naturally attractive you become. Not because you don't care, but because your identity isn't dependent on someone else's response. That subtle distinction changes everything. This is why only a small percentage ever pass this test. Not because it's difficult, but because it requires unlearning, letting go of emotional habits that feel protective but actually create weakness. Later, you may notice how often society encourages men to chase clarity instead of composure. As we move toward the end, consider this question quietly. How often does your mood change based on someone else's behavior? How often do you give emotional power away without realizing it? There's no judgment here, only observation. If you've experienced moments of emotional distance, rejection, or confusion in modern dating, you're not alone. Share what you noticed about your own reactions. Not what happened, but how you responded internally. Those reflections are where the real discussion begins. And if someone you know might recognize themselves in these patterns, sharing this perspective might help them notice what they've been missing. Because the real test was never about intelligence. It was about emotional self-governance. And once you see that, you'll start noticing these patterns everywhere, especially in yourself.